My name is Tiffany, and for 18 years, I lived with my parents, Lisa and Robert, in a modest two-story house on the outskirts of Minneapolis. It was a house where every morning began with the monotonous sound of an alarm clock and the smell of Mom's coffee, and every evening ended with the faint hum of the TV, barely audible from their bedroom. We weren't the kind of family that hosted movie nights or went on thrilling vacations. There were no loud celebrations, vibrant parties, or bursts of laughter. Everything felt predictable, as if it ran on a set schedule. But I had decided that this was what life was supposed to look like. My parents seemed stable to me, even if a little distant. My mom, Lisa, worked as an accountant. Her evenings were spent at the kitchen table with her trusty laptop surrounded by spreadsheets, checks, and neatly arranged pens. Sometimes I would watch her fingers move across the keyboard, quick and precise, as if each keystroke was part of an important mission. My dad, Robert, was a salesman. His voice filled our house almost constantly, either talking to clients on the phone or rehearsing his presentations. Sometimes it seemed to me that he could sell anything, even our old house. They fulfilled all their parental duties without excess emotion. They provided me with food, clothes, and checked my homework. But there was always something standing between us, a permanent distance I couldn't bridge. No warm hugs or casual "I love yous" like I'd seen in other families. I always told myself that it was just their style, reserved, businesslike, devoid of unnecessary sentimentality. But sometimes, I couldn't help but envy kids who could climb into their parents' laps or say, at any moment, that they loved them. On my 18th birthday, I didn't expect anything special, as usual. Mom seemed a little more focused than usual that morning. Her eyes were serious, and her voice carried a stricter tone when she said, "Sweetheart, we need to talk after dinner." I didn't think much of it, assuming they might be planning a surprise. We never celebrated birthdays extravagantly, and to be honest, I'd grown used to it. Still, deep down, I hoped they might decide to do something out of the ordinary. That evening, we sat at the kitchen table. My birthday dinner was my choice, takeout pizza. I chewed the last slice slowly, sensing an unusual tension in the air. Mom barely touched her portion, and Dad kept checking his phone. It felt as though they were both nervous but trying hard to hide it. "Well, Tiffany," Dad finally spoke, setting his phone down. His tone was businesslike, as if he were preparing to close another deal. "Your mom and I have been planning something for a while. And since you turned 18 today, it's time to tell you." I perked up, expecting something exciting. Maybe they were going to talk about my college plans? Or perhaps they had a surprise gift. But their next words hit me like a cold shower. "We're selling the house," Mom announced matter-of-factly, her tone as casual as if she were talking about changing the wallpaper. "Your dad and I are moving to Europe. We're planning to start our own business there." I froze, waiting for more. Maybe they would say we were moving together. Or that this was just temporary. But the words that followed shattered my world. "You're not coming with us," Mom added, her voice calm, as though she were merely discussing the weather. "You're 18 now. An adult should be able to take care of themselves." "What about college?" I stammered, barely finding the strength to speak. "I was planning to apply." "That's your responsibility now," Mom interrupted, clearing the table. "We've given you everything you need to get started. You have to figure it out on your own." I stared at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. My heart was pounding, and my mind was in chaos. Mom spoke as if I were some kind of project they had completed and were now ready to abandon. Her words, "You were a burden," felt especially sharp, like a blow that made it hard to breathe. "You can stay here until we sell the house," Dad added, his tone almost magnanimous, as if he were doing me a favor. "But the sooner you sort out your situation, the better it'll be for everyone." The world around me seemed to fall silent. The sound of the dishwasher, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, it all felt distant, insignificant. Their words still rang in my ears, but I couldn't figure out how to respond to them. I sat at the kitchen table, feeling their words from earlier sink into every corner of my mind. They continued to talk about real estate prices and how to sell the house profitably, but their voices became mere background noise to me. My gaze was fixed on nothing, and memories swirled chaotically in my head. My entire life, which had seemed ordinary until that moment, suddenly took on a new light. Every curt "okay" instead of praise, every cold dinner without conversation, every "not now, Tiffany," said under the guise of being busy, all of it now fell into place. This wasn't a different parenting style, as I had convinced myself. It was deliberate detachment, a sign that I had been something they just had to endure. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My body felt heavy, my heart was pounding in my throat, and my hands were trembling so much that I could barely hold my phone. Without much thought about what I would say, I dialed Grandma Eleanor's number. Her voice came on after the second ring, and just hearing it made me feel a little better. "Tiffany? Is everything all right, dear? You never call this early." Her warm voice broke through my numbness. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words got stuck somewhere inside me. Finally, I managed to choke out, "Grandma, they're leaving me." The words poured out in a rush. I told her everything, from the dinner last night to Mom's cold remarks, right down to their determination to leave me behind. When I got to the part where Mom called me a burden, I heard Grandma's breath grow heavier on the other end, and then she muttered something under her breath. Utterly shameless. Her voice was low but full of anger. It was the first time I'd ever heard her speak like that. "Tiffany," she said louder now, "pack your things. You're coming to live with me. Right away." I didn't argue. The thought of staying didn't even cross my mind. I climbed up to the attic, grabbed my old, dusty suitcase, and began throwing things into it: clothes, photos, my laptop, a couple of books, jewelry. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip it up. As I came downstairs, I saw my parents still engrossed in their conversation about selling the house. They barely noticed as I dragged my suitcase past them. Not a single question about where I was going, no goodbye, not even a hint of concern. It was the final confirmation of just how little I meant to them. Grandma was already waiting for me on her porch. When I got out of the car, she hugged me tightly, the way I'd always wished Mom would. Her embrace was warm, genuine, filled with love. She led me inside her cozy home, a place I knew by heart. On the kitchen table sat a cup of her famous hot chocolate, piled high with marshmallows, just like when I was a kid. As I sat down, Grandma looked at me intently, her face resolute. "Tiffany," she said, leaving no room for doubt, "first things first. You're going to college. That's not up for discussion." "Grandma, I can't take your money," I started, but she quickly cut me off. "You're not taking anything," she replied firmly. "I'm giving it. I set this money aside for a time when you might need saving. Well, that time has come." She reached across the table and held my hand, her gaze soft but full of strength. "And one more thing," she added. "I'm going to make changes to my will." I looked up, not understanding where she was going with this. "This house, my savings, everything will go to you, Tiffany. Not a single penny will go to your mother." Her face turned fierce, something I had never seen before. "This house isn't a mansion, but it's fully paid off. These savings aren't millions, but they're enough. It's all going to be yours." Her words filled me with both gratitude and bitterness. I couldn't believe how quickly she had taken responsibility for my future. Later, as we sat in her small but cozy living room, Grandma spoke again, her voice cautious. "Tiffany, there's something we need to discuss," she said, setting her teacup on its saucer. "I think it's best if we keep this to ourselves. There's no need to air dirty laundry in public." I nodded. Even if she hadn't said it, I already knew this would be our secret, our quiet battle for a new life that was just beginning to take shape before me. I nodded again, feeling her words sink deep into my heart. She didn't need to explain further. The truth about how I'd ended up here was too heavy to share with anyone else, but her support was my lifeline. "Let people think what they want, sweetheart," she said softly, patting my hand. What matters is that we know the truth, and that's enough. Life with Grandma soon settled into a routine, one that was surprisingly comforting. Every morning, I woke up to the smell of her coffee and the soft hum of her humming from the kitchen. We ate breakfast together. I would tell her about my plans for the day, and she would offer her practical advice. Her wisdom came so naturally that I didn't even notice how much I had begun to rely on her opinion. After breakfast, I'd head off to my classes at the university, throwing myself into my studies and trying not to dwell on the past. In the evenings, I'd come home to find Grandma waiting for me with a hot dinner. We would talk for hours, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. She'd work on a crossword puzzle while I read my textbooks. These moments were ones I cherished, even if I didn't fully realize their value at the time. Sometimes relatives would visit Grandma. During one such visit, Aunt Sarah, an energetic woman with a perpetual smile, casually remarked, "Tiffany, are you living here now? I heard Lisa and Robert finally made it to Europe. Seems like they've started some kind of business there. Do you know what it is?" I just nodded, mumbling something about needing to study, and quickly retreated to my room. Listening to people talk about my parents, who had built a life for themselves and left me behind, was painful. But what was even harder to endure was how my relatives seemed to think of me as some kind of heroine. "You're such a strong young woman, Tiffany," Uncle Mike said at one family dinner, patting me on the shoulder. "Taking responsibility for your life so early, that's admirable. Not everyone your age would have the guts to embrace independence like that," added my cousin Rachel, beaming with her usual self-confidence. Every time, I forced a smile and tried to change the subject. The truth was too heavy to share. It was easier to let everyone think I had left home voluntarily, in search of independence. It made things simpler for them. It made things simpler for me. But the peace didn't last long. Grandma started showing signs of exhaustion. At first, it was barely noticeable. She rested longer after walks and postponed her usual crossword puzzles. We both chalked it up to age. But soon, her condition worsened. Her face grew paler, and the light in her kind eyes dimmed. By the time we went to the doctor, it was already too late. I remember him saying something about an aggressive stage and a complex situation. Every word felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. I spent every moment with her, holding her hand in the hospital room and watching her every movement. One night, under the glow of the moonlight outside her window, when her breathing had become faint, she whispered, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Tiffany. Never forget that." Her voice was weak, but her eyes were clear, filled with love. I held her hand tightly until the very last moment, until her eyes closed forever. She passed quietly, leaving me in a world that suddenly felt empty. Her funeral was modest but heartfelt. Relatives gathered to honor her memory. Aunt Sarah told me that my parents had been informed of her death but said they couldn't make it from Europe so quickly. Their absence was a cold confirmation that I had long ceased to be a part of their lives. Graduating from university was one of the hardest moments for me. Standing on stage with my diploma in hand, I struggled to hold back tears. The one person I wanted to see in that moment, the one person I longed for a hug from, was no longer there. But her voice echoed inside me, her unwavering support guiding me even after she was gone. Thanks to Grandma, I was able to move forward. Her savings gave me the chance to build a new life. I bought a small apartment closer to the city center and landed a job at Preston & Associates, an investment firm. It was a serious, promising position, something I had never even dreamed of before. I decided to keep her house. I couldn't bring myself to sell the place that had become a symbol of safety and love for me. But I couldn't live there without her either. I rented it out, letting it continue to serve a purpose while remaining a part of me. Her kindness, her love, and her wisdom would stay with me forever. Grandma didn't just give me a home or savings, she gave me the chance to build a life with confidence in myself. And though new challenges awaited me, I knew her voice would never fade from within me. Life always feels unpredictable, as if it's playing its endless games with us. It was that unpredictability that led to my meeting James, a moment that started with a small mix-up. I was preparing for my first big presentation at Preston and Associates. My desk was covered with scattered papers, and empty coffee cups stood like monuments to my exhaustion as I frantically double-checked the last slides. When the conference room door opened, I didn't even look up, assuming it was one of my colleagues. Either this isn't the Thompson meeting, or they've decided to radically change their marketing strategy, came a male voice with a slight hint of sarcasm. I looked up to see a tall man with warm brown eyes. His eyebrows were slightly raised, and a smile played on his lips, making me feel instantly at ease. I froze for a moment, then laughed when I noticed him taking in the chaos around me. "Sorry, but I'm afraid you've got the wrong room," I finally said, recovering. "Thompson's meeting is next door, but it seems you've stumbled into someone who values good coffee even more." "Well, this might just be the best mistake of my day," he replied, relaxing a bit. That's how it all started. Our first coffee date turned into a long walk through the city at night, where we talked about everything: favorite books, travel, and even how we both accidentally triggered fire alarms back in school. The second date quickly followed the first, and before long, I couldn't imagine my days without James. He was different. Completely unlike anyone I had met before. Warm, caring, attentive, it was as though he knew how to find the cracks in my soul and gently heal them. When I told him the whole story about my parents one day, he didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty reassurances. He just listened, holding my hands, and then quietly said, "You didn't deserve any of this." Not a single bit. Those words were simple, but they held everything I had ever wanted to hear. I broke down in tears, and he wiped them away, staying by my side. 1.5 years had passed since the day James accidentally walked into my conference room. One evening, he invited me to the restaurant where we had our first date. I immediately noticed how nervous he was, fidgeting with his napkin, checking his pockets every few minutes. But I didn't say anything, sensing he was planning something. When dessert arrived, I saw it, a small box sitting next to the chocolate soufflé. I froze, unable to believe my eyes, until James picked it up, opened it, and showed me the ring. It was perfect, delicate, with a diamond that caught the candlelight and scattered it across the table. "I want to build a family with you," he said, his voice trembling but filled with certainty. "A real family. Full of love. The kind you've always deserved." I couldn't hold back my tears. I whispered, "Yes," and he slipped the ring onto my finger. For the first time in years, I felt whole, as though all the cracks inside me had finally disappeared. The next day, I posted a picture on social media of my hand with the ring. James was hugging me from behind, and I captioned it, "Yes, forever, with my best friend." My heart was bursting with joy, and I felt like I could conquer the world. But 2 days later, a message arrived. When I saw the sender's name, my stomach clenched. It was from my mom. I stared at the screen for a long time before summoning the courage to open it. The text read, "Dear Tiffany, your father and I just saw your wonderful news. We are so incredibly happy for you. We know we have no right to ask, but we've spent years regretting how we treated you. Not a day goes by that we don't think about our terrible mistakes. We would be honored to attend your engagement party and try to make amends. We understand if you say no, but we miss you so much. Love. Mom and Dad." The words blurred before my eyes as I read and reread them. A whirlwind of emotions surged in my chest: regret, anger, confusion. When James came home, I showed him the message, my hands trembling. "What do you think?" I asked quietly, my voice betraying my vulnerability. He read the message twice, then wrapped his arms around my shoulders. "I think this is entirely your decision," he said. "But if they really have changed, if they truly regret what they did, maybe they deserve a chance to prove it." I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his arms, but deep down, I knew this was a decision that could change everything. I thought about Grandma. Her image was so vivid in my mind, it felt as though she were sitting across from me, holding her usual cup of tea with its faint lemon aroma. What would she say if she saw all of this? She would probably gently caution me to be careful, but would also remind me to follow my heart and trust my intuition. Those thoughts gave me strength. One chance, I whispered to myself, more to calm my nerves than to truly believe the words. I sent a short message back. The party is next Saturday at 7 p.m. You can come at 6 o'clock if you'd like to talk. My hands shook as I typed, and my heart pounded so loudly it felt like it could drown out the silence in the apartment. That Saturday, I felt like a storm was raging inside me. James, noticing my anxiety, hugged me, kissed my cheek, and left to pick up the catering, leaving me alone to face a past I would have preferred to forget. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, smoothed the fabric of my dress, and opened the door. Standing in front of me were my parents. Mom was wearing an expensive dress with a pearl necklace around her neck, her hair perfectly styled as always. Dad looked impeccable in his tailored suit. They looked familiar, yet completely foreign at the same time. "Tiffany, sweetheart," Mom began, reaching out for a hug. I let her hug me, but I stayed still. The embrace was awkward, cold. "You look wonderful," she added, stepping back. "And what a beautiful apartment." "Thank you," I replied curtly and invited them inside. They perched on the edge of the couch as though afraid to wrinkle the upholstery, glancing around the room. Mom made superficial comments about the color of the curtains, while Dad asked about my job. They acted like strangers at a formal meeting rather than family who had once shared a home and dinners together. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. His face, which had maintained a polite expression until now, grew serious. "Tiffany, let's get to the point," he said, sitting up straighter. My heart clenched, and my stomach twisted with dread. "To the point?" I repeated, feeling my voice tremble slightly. "Yes," Mom interjected, leaning forward. Her eyes were cold and calculating. "We know about your inheritance. About Grandma's house, the savings. We know everything. And we've done our research," Dad added, as if this were a business negotiation. "That house is worth at least $300,000 in today's market. We're also certain that Grandma had significant savings," Mom continued, her voice growing sharper. "Plus, it's clear you're doing very well. A nice apartment, a wealthy fiancé. We think you can afford to share." I stared at them, feeling their words morph into poisonous darts. "What are you trying to say?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "We want $70,000, Dad said bluntly, without the slightest hesitation. "It's less than what we could demand, but we're trying to be reasonable." My jaw nearly dropped in disbelief. "You can't be serious," I whispered, shocked by their audacity. "We're completely serious," Mom said, pulling a small notebook out of her purse. "Here are my calculations. As your parents, we're entitled to part of the inheritance. If you refuse, we'll have no choice but to take this to court." My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear her words. "Court?" I breathed. "We'll claim half of everything, the house, the savings, any assets you received," Dad added, his tone turning harsher, colder. "And if you don't agree, we'll make sure everyone knows how you manipulated your grandmother into cutting us out of the will." My eyes widened, and my hands clenched into fists. "That's not true. I would never." "It doesn't matter," Mom interrupted. "What matters is what people believe. Do you want your relatives to hear that you supposedly cut your parents out of the will? Do you want your new in-laws to think the same?" I didn't know how to respond. My chest ached, and my thoughts were a jumbled mess. At that moment, the doorbell rang. "Early guests." "I need time to think," I said, standing up and feeling lightheaded. "Think quickly," Dad said, rising and adjusting his tie. "We expect an answer soon." They left just as James's parents walked into the apartment, all smiles and congratulations. I forced a fake smile and tried to focus on greeting the guests. But my mind felt like it was in chaos, as if I were watching everything unfold from underwater. Laughter filled the room, and people congratulated us on the engagement, but I could barely concentrate. The image of my parents, their cold, calculating faces, haunted me. I felt a wave of anger and helplessness growing inside me, but all I could do was keep smiling and make sure no one noticed how my world had once again been turned upside down. The next morning, after the party, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone as if it were something poisonous. The apartment was dim, and a cup of coffee sat on the table, long gone cold. But I barely noticed it, or the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. James had left for work earlier, but before he did, he hugged me tightly, as if trying to pass his strength on to me. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," he whispered, kissing my forehead. His voice was calm, but I knew he was just as worried as I was. When the door closed behind him, I took a deep breath. This time, my hands weren't trembling. I tapped on the contact and, as the first ring sounded, felt my heartbeat quicken. Mom answered immediately, as if she'd been sitting by the phone, waiting for my call. "Did you do it?" she snapped, skipping any greeting or pretense of pleasantries. "Yes," I replied evenly, summoning every ounce of strength I had. "I'm not giving you any money. Grandma made her choice, and I'm respecting it." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, her voice hissed through the line. "You'll regret this." And the line went dead. I sat frozen, feeling an unsettling emptiness inside me after that conversation. But they didn't make me wait long. That evening, my phone buzzed with notifications. I saw that my parents had posted a long message on social media. Their post was filled with sad emojis and perfectly filtered photos, where they looked broken and miserable. I felt the blood run cold in my veins as I read. "Our hearts are breaking. After losing everything in Europe, our home, business, and savings, we turned to our only daughter for help. But Tiffany, who lives in luxury with her wealthy fiancé, refused to help us. Now we're homeless, moving from one house to another, not knowing where we'll sleep tomorrow. How did we raise such a heartless child?" Soon, my phone exploded with messages. Relatives, friends, even acquaintances from the past started writing to me, each condemning message hitting me like a punch. "Tiffany, how could you?" wrote Aunt Martha. "Your parents raised you for 18 years. Now you have plenty of money, why can't you help them?" "They need a place to stay," shouted my cousin's voice through yet another phone call. "Your grandma's house is huge. Why can't they live there?" The most painful message came from Uncle Peter. "Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. Your parents sacrificed everything for your future, and you abandoned them in their time of need." I wanted to scream, to tell everyone the truth, but every time I opened my mouth or raised my hands to type something, the words got stuck in my throat. The feeling of suffocation became almost unbearable. And then the real blows came. Some of the guests invited to the wedding started backing out. "I'm sorry, Tiffany," one friend wrote. "I can't celebrate while your parents are suffering." Cousin Rachel added a cutting remark. "What kind of person starts their marriage by turning their back on their family?" And finally, there was Uncle Mike, who had always been kind to me at family gatherings. His message was dry and cold. "Tiffany, as a lawyer, I'm obligated to inform you that I am representing your parents in their lawsuit against you. The law clearly outlines the rights of parents to inheritance, and your grandmother's will can be contested. Expect official notice soon. I strongly advise you to reconsider your position before this escalates. You don't want to start your married life with a court battle." I sat in the kitchen, staring at my phone, rereading those words over and over, as if that might somehow change them. My big family had united against me. The irony of it was almost laughable. They finally saw me as the monster my parents always claimed I was. But they saw me for all the wrong reasons. When James came home, he found me still sitting at the table. My phone lay in front of me, and my eyes were vacant. He immediately knew something was wrong and came over to me. "What happened?" he asked quietly, his voice laced with concern. I couldn't say a word. He glanced at my phone, then back at me, and gently took my hands, pulling me into his arms. His embrace was warm and steady, like an anchor in a stormy sea. "I'm here," he said, stroking my back. "We'll get through this together. You're not alone." I closed my eyes and let myself relax in his arms, feeling, for the first time that day, like I wasn't drowning. Later, I sat down at my computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as if their weight had suddenly become unbearable. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. For years, I had stayed silent. For years, I had let people believe the lies my parents created. But today, I reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. As I began to type, it felt like each word lifted a weight I had carried for 8 long years. To my family and friends. I've been silent for 8 years about what really happened between me and my parents. I allowed everyone to believe their version of events because the truth was too painful to share. But now, I have no choice. On my 18th birthday, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table and told me they were selling our house and moving to Europe. They told me I wasn't coming with them. "You've been a burden for 18 years. That's more than enough," my mother said. They refused to help me with college, refused to offer me any support. They told me I needed to figure out my life on my own while they finalized the sale of the house. I didn't choose independence, as they've claimed in their stories. I was abandoned. My fingers paused for a moment, but I forced myself to continue. Grandma Eleanor took me in that same night. She gave me a home, paid for my education, and showed me what unconditional love truly is. She became the person who guided me through the darkest moments of my life. And now my parents are back, demanding $70,000 and threatening to sue me for half of Grandma's inheritance. They're threatening to ruin my reputation if I don't comply. But Grandma, being the wise woman she was, anticipated this moment. And today, I'm ready to share what I've kept hidden for so long. I attached a video file. My heart clenched as I pressed the upload button. The video took a few seconds to load, but it felt like an eternity. When it was added, I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Grandma's face filled the frame. She looked tired, but her eyes were filled with resolve. In the background, her lawyer, Mr. Thompson, could be seen. Her voice was steady despite her frailty. "Lisa," she began, addressing my mother directly, "if you're watching this, it means you're trying to claim what I left for Tiffany. I knew this moment would come. You're my daughter, and I love you, but your greed has poisoned your heart. I, Eleanor Marie Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, am recording this message in the presence of my attorney. I want to make it absolutely clear why I left everything to Tiffany. 8 years ago, you and Robert abandoned your child as if she meant nothing. You refused to help her with her education, refused to offer her any support. You called her a burden. A burden, Lisa. Your own daughter, the one you brought into this world. I watched Tiffany endure all of this. She never told anyone what you had done. She kept your secret, even as relatives praised you for raising such an independent daughter. She protected your reputation while you turned your back on her. I am leaving my house, my savings, and everything I own to Tiffany. Not because she manipulated me, as I'm sure you'll claim, but because she showed more strength and grace in her pain than you ever have in your entire life. This is my final decision, made with full clarity and witnessed by my attorney. Tiffany is the light of my soul. That's all I have to say." The video ended with Grandma's lawyer confirming the date and circumstances of the recording. I couldn't stop the tears as I watched it again. But I knew I was doing the right thing. At the end of my post, I added a few final lines. "I have kept this video private for years, respecting Grandma's wish to avoid family drama. But now, with my parents threatening legal action and spreading lies, I have no choice but to share the truth. This is their story. And this is mine." I posted it and leaned back in my chair, feeling both drained and liberated. For the first time in years, I had spoken the truth without holding back. James walked over to me, placing his hands on my shoulders and gently squeezing them. "You did everything you could," he said, his voice full of unwavering confidence. Now let the truth do its work. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to take a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I'm sorry you all had to find out this way. Those words, the final ones in my post, flickered on the screen as I stared at the post button. Taking one last deep breath, I pressed it, as if closing the door on one world and opening the door to another. Within minutes, the responses began pouring in. The first call came from Uncle Mike. His voice, usually firm and composed, was shaky. "Tiffany," he began but then fell silent, as if struggling to find the right words. "My God. I had no idea." His voice was filled with genuine regret. "I'm withdrawing from the case immediately. What they did to you, it's just unforgivable." "Thank you, Uncle Mike," I replied softly, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. A few minutes later, another call came. It was Aunt Sarah. I barely managed to answer before I heard her sobbing on the other end. "Tiffany, sweetheart. At that dinner on your birthday. I remember bringing you a gift, but your parents told me you had moved out. They were so proud of your independence back then." Her voice broke. How could they? How could I not see the truth? I didn't know what to say, so I just listened to her tearful apologies. Then came the family group chat. It practically exploded with messages. Shocked, remorseful words poured in, so many that I couldn't keep up with them all. Even cousin Rachel, who had just days earlier condemned me for my heartlessness, wrote a long, heartfelt message. "Tiffany, I'm so ashamed of myself for judging you without knowing the truth. Your parents painted a completely different picture, and I believed them. I'm so sorry. Please tell me it's not too late to come to your wedding. I want to be there to support you." I replied to each of them, assuring them there were no hard feelings and letting them know their place cards would be waiting for them at the wedding. One by one, the cancelled RSVPs began to disappear, replaced by apologies and promises to attend. Even distant relatives I barely knew sent words of support. They expressed shock and sympathy, unable to believe that my parents could have done what they did. Through rumors, I heard fragments of news about my parents. After their European dreams fell apart, they returned to the States and moved in with old college friends. Mom found work as an accountant at a small company, and Dad picked up sales gigs, taking whatever jobs he could find. Their lives, once full of ambition, had now been reduced to a struggle for survival. Some might have expected me to feel guilty for exposing the truth, for revealing their hypocrisy. But I felt nothing but peace. The night before my wedding, as I sat on the couch, I gazed at a photo of Grandma on the mantelpiece. Her eyes, even in the picture, were full of warmth and strength. "You were right, Grandma," I whispered, clutching a cup of tea in my hands. The truth really did set me free. I felt James come up behind me, wrapping his arms around me and resting his chin on my shoulder. "What do you regret?" he asked softly, as if reading my thoughts. I paused, reflecting. I thought about my 18-year-old self, scared and packing her belongings into an old suitcase, and about Grandma, who greeted me that night with the embrace I had been searching for my whole life. I thought about how I had hidden the truth behind smiles, how I had tried to please everyone until that truth finally broke free. I thought about how I had learned, step by step, to be strong and independent. "Nothing," I said, turning to him. "I'm no longer carrying someone else's lies. And I never will again." The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror in my wedding dress, surrounded by family members who now knew the real me. They saw both the pain I had endured and the strength it had given me. James was waiting for me at the altar, and I knew that only light lay ahead of us. My parents, of course, didn't come. Their seats at the table remained empty, but it no longer mattered. I had everything I needed: love, truth, and, at last, the long-awaited peace I had been searching for. Some might say I was heartless for cutting my parents out of my life, for not helping them in their time of need. But now I knew, family isn't about obligation or guilt. Family is about love, support, and truth. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is simply let go.